Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Dr. Kavita Parekh, and on behalf of the TechX team at Venture Center, I'm happy to host today's awareness talk all about spinouts. Let me briefly introduce Venture Center and TechX for those of you who are new. Venture Center is an award winning leading technology business incubator for science and technology startups in India. We specialize in supporting deep tech innovations by helping innovators and startups to commercialize their ideas. Venture Center has a dedicated team which supports innovators and startups via various initiatives in the technology management domain. TechX is a technology transfer office supported by NBM BIRAC via their National Biopharma Mission Initiative. The TechX team offers services and initiatives around technology commercialization through tech marketing, tech transfer, deal structuring, valuation, and agreements, spin-off creations, and other new venture creations. Our team offers services and initiatives around tech commercialization, deal structuring, tech transfer valuations, spin-offs, or new venture creations, and also for IP protection, search analytics policies, and support for institutions in innovation management. We are actively involved in industry academia partnership and contract management. You can feel free to reach out for more details. As a part of our initiative, we host several awareness workshops and training sessions. Today's is one example of such a talk. We are hosting this aimed at academic faculty and researchers, and we have posted in the link an EOI link for interested participants. So those of you who are interested in knowing more about spinouts or are interested in a spinout, do reach out to us by filling up that link. So, welcome to this talk on spinouts, and our speaker for today is Dr. Premnath V. Let me briefly introduce him before we begin the talk. Dr. Premnath is Chief Scientist, Polymer Science and Engineering Division at NCL, and he is the founder director at Venture Center. He is a technology developer, innovation and incubation manager, startup mentor, and a co founder of two medtech startups. For the last 17 years at Venture Center, he has provided leadership for teams that have won national awards for tech development, IP management, and business incubation. He is a chemical engineer and an alumnus of MIT in US and IIT-Bombay. He has a Chevening Technology Enterprise Scholar in Cambridge, UK. And with this very brief introduction, I welcome you, Dr. Premnath, and hand over the session to you. Over to you.
Hi, and good afternoon to everybody. Kavita, you mentioned some link. I don't see a link in the chat box, so maybe that's
Yeah,
something which you need to
we'll
put
just,
over there.
yes,
Okay,
we'll just put it over.
okay. Let's get started. Today's topic is about spinouts, and I'll try my best to share some learnings which we have had. Uh, some of it, maybe some of you might have heard, but I've tried to include a few other points as well. If you have questions, feel free to put it in the chat box. Kavita, can you see my slides?
Yes, we can see your slides.
You can hear me clearly?
Yes.
Okay. Please alert me when I'm running out of time. Okay. Okay. So today's topic is spin-outs, and let's just dive right into it. Let's talk about it. So today's topic, I'll try to cover it in the following parts. One, I'll first talk about spin-out companies, especially academic spin-outs. Briefly look at a few examples. Let's talk about why people are interested in it, why they want to do it, a little bit about how to go about it. A special category of spin-outs is faculty entrepreneurship. Then we can look at a few more examples and a few tips and pointers on especially in the context of faculty entrepreneurship as well. I had done a talk sometime back on faculty entrepreneurship in the Only One Theme series. So a few slides from there might overlap. So bear with me on that. But let's talk about spinouts first. Okay. So what is a spinout company? So let's look at that. Hmm? By the way, there are a lot of different views on what is a spinout. There's also this word spin out, there's a word spin off. There are people who distinguish between the two, and there are people who think they are the same. So I don't want to get into that in detail, but generally speaking, spin outs are new entities, and typically they are born out of a parent organization and usually, and especially the academic context, intellectual property is passing from the parent company some rights to the spin out company. And uh, and I also, as I'll tell you, I tend to add one more layer to it, which is that I would define it also one where there are certain equity linked relationships between the two parties. Okay. Um, so that is how I would define it. Of course, as you can see in these links out here, um, especially the one below, you can look at spin-off as a new and separate company that's created when a parent company distributes shares in a subsidiary or business division to a parent company shareholders. So it's a type of divestiture is what it's talking about. But anyway, let us continue further. So the way I'm going to look at it is one, as I told you, it's a new company, startup. There's a technology license from an academic organization or a parent organization. By the way, that parent could be a company as well. Okay, you can have spin outs from companies as well. Um, for example, Waymo, say, coming from Alphabet, which is which is a parent of Google, would be one example of that. Or it could and I have added here one more layer with academia or parent has potential equity linked rewards. The reason I'm adding that is because we could also have this option of startup licenses, right? Where academia licenses to startups. And that is just like any other license. There's no distinction. It's just that the company happens to be a startup founded on the technology rather than an ongoing concern, which is licensing any technology. So here, uh, I'm trying to distinguish that, saying that these are where there are equity linked rewards as well. So let's look at a few possible options and discuss those as well. So I have a table here which looks at different types of nomenclatures just to so that we understand this. So you could have situations where there's a new entity being created with its own IP, right? Or a third party IP. There's no academia involved. There's no faculty involved. That's a regular startup which you normally see. Then there are those which, where the source of technology can be an academic organization or a parent. And there may be a traditional license over there. That means there's only license fee, running royalties, whether faculty are involved or not. I would still consider it a startup with or without faculty founders with a startup license from an academic organization. I'm calling a spin out as something where there is equity or equivalent terms which are there in the kind of licensing that one is doing to the new entity that you are creating from an academic organization. But just to be clear, some people do refer to C and D categories here also as spin outs, which is fine. It's just that you might, if you're trying to do some statistics, you might want to ask people what they mean by spinouts and get the definition clear. Otherwise, for our purposes, which is today's talk, is largely for people who want to create spinouts and facilitate those spinouts. So for them, it may not matter, the nomenclature may not matter as much beyond a point. So let's understand when new varieties, new ventures are created, what are the different things, possibilities, new ventures created from academia, what are the kind of possible options there can be? So there are four axes on which you can look at these new startups being created. And there are these questions which I have posed there. The first one says, is the institute the source of founding technology? So the founding technology is the institute the source, right? That's one axis. Another axis is, are the founding team members associated in the institute? So that could be in that they are faculty, they are, say, students, they could be, any staff, whatever. So that is another set, right? And you could have different combinations of, say, institute giving the founding technology and whether team members are involved or not, and different combinations as well. There might also be situations where the institute is going to support with joint research, consultancy, technical support, facility access, whatever it is. And there could be also another axis which relates to whether the institution enjoys any equity linked benefits. So the deal that is struck between the parent organization and the spin out, does it have any equity linked benefits at all, directly or indirectly? So all these four, you can play around with different combinations, and all of those are possible. There's nothing that you can do it whichever way you want to do it. Okay, so there's also in this one class which I talked about, where the founding team members were associated with the institute, and when that is the case, you can have different variants again. Students, staff, faculty, alumni, each of these, any of these being involved. There are situations where these equity arrangements are available to new spinouts only if, say, students, staff, faculty, or alumni are involved, right? There are organizations which insist on that. They don't make that available to every other licensee as well. That might be part of the policies, right? And sometimes it's also part of a process of de-risking because we don't, sometimes the information on who the potential licensee is not clear. They may go for a traditional license in those cases rather than a license involving equity arrangements. Sometimes there are policies in institutions where if a student, staff, faculty, alumni is involved, then they are the preferred party for licensing. That means you prefer them over any other licensee. And sometimes there can also be preferential terms as encouragement because you want many more students, staff, faculty, alumni to create some of those entities because you know that those are related to how an organization can show impact that it can create in society through some of these spin-outs, right? So these are all, again, possibilities amongst the kind of terms that we see, in spin-outs that are created as well. A few things about equity-linked rewards. Equity-linked rewards and spin-outs can take different forms. There's a situation where, say, the parent organization or the university might hold the equity directly, or it might be held through a partner entity, such as an incubator associated with the parent organization. And sometimes it is also structured in the form of, say, milestone payments linked to equity appreciation or valuation triggers. For example, I remember that um, uh, Columbia University used to do some of this for quite some time. But there are many institutions who might choose to do it this way and not the other. So all these three possibilities also exist. So as you can see, I'm telling you that there are different axes and different combinations of conditions where you can get different types of spinouts, where there is different things being put into the organization from the parent organization, different kinds of equity linked arrangements. Okay. And even amongst this, further down, if you look at it in the equity linked arrangements, you can also see a set of general rules that you will see coming in the Indian context. So, in the Indian context, typically, if you're getting into equity linked arrangements, you'll probably be, as an academic or research organization, either a non-profit that doesn't enjoy tax exemption or is an approved non-profit incubator with tax exemption, right? So that the reason I say this is because there's a provision in the tax laws by which only the only not-for-profit that can hold shares or invest in equity in a startup company is one that is approved non-profit incubators approved by the government's departments like Ministry of Science and Technology arms, and they are allowed to do it without losing their tax exemptions. Okay. Um, the second point that I've listed here is you could do equity arrangements in such a way that is just equity terms, or a combination of equity and running royalty kind of terms. By the way, you see the second one commonly in many US universities. And you could also have situations where the deferred payments linked to valuation milestones, especially when, say, an organization is averse to holding equity as well. Okay. Typically, the shareholding of the institute is kept low. 1 to 5% is considered the norm. In some countries in Europe, UK, Australia, there were cases of larger shareholding, and typically they are seen by investors unfavorably. So that's not considered the best of situation, unless, of course, that before the investors come in, the shareholding pattern has changed considerably, such that the institute or university is holding roughly in the range of 1 to 5%. So in the IITs in India, for example, you will see them holding about in the range of 1 to 5% typically, sometimes with a limited or a limited non-dilution clause, which is limited to a certain level of fundraising. If some of you are interested further, you can, some of you might want to browse and visit this site on the Autumn website. Autumn is the US Association for University Technology Managers, and a bunch of innovation managers have put together these template license agreements. One US Bolt license, life sciences license agreement, and a US Bolt climate term sheet. Both of these are sort of available for people to browse. And some of you may want to go and have a look at this when you have time. Just Google this, but this will also be, if you need it, ask and we'll put it up in the chat box, or later we can send it to you. So some quick examples of spin-out companies. So the Autumn puts out annual surveys, and there's a little dated survey, but you can see, that by 2017 or so, there were about 14,000 startups formed by universities. And all of these are, of course, one of the key. I think about a quarter of the licenses go to new startups that are being formed in the US. Okay. And 67, when it says, it includes small companies, which form the majority, but 25% or so usually go to startups. So US universities do rely a lot on startups in significant measure to commercialize their technologies. In India, too, of course, we are seeing a lot of action, especially in the IITs, where there are a lot of professors who are setting up companies. This article, which is, I think, 14 July, that's yesterday, which was on the Economic Times, talking about professors turned founders amid the new deep tech gold rush. VCs take note. Well, it's a positive tone, but in the US, the data does show that university spin-outs on average raise lesser money than those who are not. So uh, while it's great that this is happening, I don't want it to sound like as if it's a gold rush. It's really an effort to commercialize technology by many professors who sometimes can't find takers for their technology amongst the big companies that are over there. Recently, also in April, this article from IIT Madras talked about 100 plus deep tech startups in a single financial year. Of course, IIT Madras has been powering this activity quite a bit. Also, written here is it says more than 50% of these 104 startups were founded by IIT Madras members, faculty, staff, students, alumni. And IIT Madras is a torchbearer, I think, sort of perhaps many other institutions in India will follow in their path as well. But this has been known for a long time in the US, and we are now catching up. We have also spin outs and startups, startups with startup licenses from NCL as well, some of the national labs, and these are the ones associated with Venture Center, for example. I won't spend too much time over there. Let's continue further. So, why would you want to do this? And let's understand a little bit about the motivations behind it as well. So, First of all, whenever you create a new entity, the reason you create it is because it has a very different focus, a different mandate. You don't want to have a clash of priorities between the parent and the spin out company. And in a manner of speaking, you're celebrating different gods, right? Different value systems. Academia's goals are education, knowledge creation, taking the primary space, primary spotlight. Whereas spin-outs, the focus is more on commercial success, economic and social impact, right? And not every time you can align all of these in one direction. And it's sometimes a good idea to let both organizations flourish and pursue their own objectives. Uh, Plus, spin-outs usually are very focused on one particular problem that they are solving and going to create a business model around it, whereas academia tends to explore. They will look at multiple problems and so on and so forth. So this focus also is quite important. And that also means that there are different stakeholders, funders, investors, champions for these activities as well. So as a spin out, you will find people who are really passionate, say only about solving that particular problem, or believe that there is a lot of potential for commercial success solving that particular problem. What may be hot in science and in research may or may not be something which investors think are necessarily going to be the biggest success stories to come. So there can be those kind of differences as well, which a spin out, navigates and manages those relationships with stakeholders differently. And of course, there are differences in processes, differences in decision making. The leadership is different. There's differences in emphasis on speed, nimbleness, flexibility. You want to move fast as a startup. That's your edge. Otherwise, you'll be no different than a large company with its bureaucracy, processes, slow decision making processes, and so on and so forth. And that's what spin outs can bring to the table as well. At the end of the day, if you're a 5 member team, the decision might stop with each member rather than having to move it up the ladder in files to 3, 4, 5 layers before getting a decision on investment and taking chances and so on and so forth. So it's a much very different kind of work environment when you look at startups and spin-outs, and that's something which you need to do, especially if you need to move fast in fields which are changing very, very rapidly around you, right? The That said, uh, one of the biggest reasons for people looking at spinouts has to do with the fact that uh, in academia we typically work in the early stages of the innovation process, right? In the left side of this table, you're looking primarily at the early stages. We are looking at problem solutions and coming up with technology ideas. But what large industry typically looks for are things which are at the right end of the spectrum. Whether the innovation process is never so linear, but it's broadly in the right direction. And in between the focus of businesses on the right side and the inventors on the left side, there is a difference in terms of what is the anticipation of the opportunity in front of them, the understanding of it, foresight about what could be a potential large opportunity. The fact that industry has multiple alternate investment opportunities allows them to consider, say, investing between, say, semiconductors and potato chips. So that might be as diverse as that. And now, if that is the case, you can understand that their perspective will be considerably different in terms of the different investment opportunities that they're looking at. Um, the understanding of risk and reward is also very, very different. In the early stage innovation development, the way technologies are advanced is with a focus on creating options, and being ready with an option when the opportunity strikes, right? On the other hand, in the late stage, it is about more like a production environment. You invest in order to create a reward immediately. It's not about being ready when the opportunity hits you, right? So very different approaches to how people look at opportunities in the innovation space. And of course, business also has this issue that R&D departments in these large companies may be asked, how come you didn't come up with it, and how come a professor in a small college somewhere came up with this idea, right? So they have this issue of not being made here, and therefore you don't find some champions very often. In which case, your ideas, if you're trying to pursue ideas, which is why you got into academia or research in the first place, is a little bit of frustrating exercise for many scientists. Trying to advance it further and finding no takers. And at the end of the day, you have academic success, but you may not have impact, which bothers many people, and they want to do something about it. And that's one of the reasons why people get into spin outs at all. But this journey is pretty long, pretty difficult. And it's this transition from coming up with proof of concepts in the lab to getting into a commercial product. That's a pretty long journey. And that long journey requires multiple champions. And multiple champions basically means you need people who buy into it, you need investors who buy into it, anybody who's investing their efforts to buy into it. And if that is the case, invariably, you need to have a mechanism to both share risks and to share rewards, right? And that mechanism to do that is a new legal entity, basically, right? And that new legal entity is a spin out, right? So that's one way of looking at why startups are created and why they need to be created when you're working with new ideas. It's also well known in the US data, economic data, that startups drive commercialization of high impact innovations. And that's one of the key drivers for commercialization of technologies coming out of academia. And startups are uh, uh, willing to look early at technologies and look at opportunities which might come along the way further down the road, look at with foresight at a future opportunity, which some of the larger companies may not be willing to do because they're sitting on cash cows and they're busy protecting their cash cows and growing those cash cows itself. Okay. So all that said, overall, I find that most people who get into entrepreneurship get into it because they want to see those ideas taken to fruition and them reaching their full potential. It's a very hard journey, entrepreneurship. So it is not at all easy, which basically means that it is not necessarily something which is, it's not about finance and so on, money or financial stability. It's about basically, if it happens, it's great. Okay, but if it doesn't happen, you're still at it. You'll try to solve the problem. You'll try to achieve the full potential of that idea and of yourself as well. So how do you go about it? Okay, if you're a scientist in this, so let me just take a minute to quickly just poll and also look at the chat box in the meantime. How many can the people here who are inventors, right? Uh, just say yes on the chat box. I want to see how many people in this audience are inventors and not technology managers, right? Who are especially looking at building their own spin outs probably at some point. Any responses? Yes. So getting, okay. So, okay, quite a few, I suppose. I don't know how many in proportion, but quite a few inventors out here itself and who might want to go about it. The others who are technology managers, incubation or innovation managers might want to facilitate these by creating the right kind of policies and environments. Typically, when you're considering doing a spin out, it starts by first aligning, in our experience, three things. One is the technology provider, that is the inventor, the R&D institute, and so on and so forth. The second is somebody who buys into the vision of that idea and the opportunity and is willing to, say, put in full-time work into it, right? And that's the committed entrepreneur. By the way, it's a very important role, probably the most important role in creating a spin-out company, which is, and probably the most difficult also, because that's where most people struggle finding co-founders to drive their ventures, and those especially who are really committed to building the business. And the third is funding, right? And funding opportunities. Now, the technology provider, let's assume it's a scientist, faculty, say from an institute, they may do a traditional license, in which case it might be a startup license. Or if they want to participate, they could come in and hence contribute to building that initial vision of the company, taking it ahead, and so on and so forth. But there'll be somebody who is fully committed to it, who is interested in the end point, the success at the end of the road, not just the technology, but selling a a product to, or a service or a solution to a end user, and therefore creating a business model around it which will sustain and scale this business itself. Funding is, of course, something which you can arrange with many different ways. One could be grant kind of funding, or it could be investors coming in into the company. Very rarely do startups, true startups, which are high risk entities, work with loans. Okay. Typically, when you do loans or engage with banks, you need to have great clarity in terms of how you're going to repay it, which means your revenue streams have to be clear. And therefore, and that is hardly the case in most startup companies. And therefore, the banks and loans are not the right vehicle usually for any kind of startup company. It's usually equity or it is grants of some kind. You can earn something along the way, which is in a sort of way of subsidizing it with some other services, but that has a way of distracting you as well. So you have to think about whether one wants to do it or not as well. So funding becomes a very important thing, especially for ventures from R&D institutes and academia. And most of the inventors coming out of or founders who are doing spin outs from academic institutes are likely to be first generation entrepreneurs. They will not have deep pockets, and therefore, grant funding plays an important role in building some of these startups as well. I just want to reiterate that while inventors are important, right, technology commercialization champions and the people who see that opportunity and bet on it, including, I mean, the full-time committed entrepreneurs are probably the most important people. Very often we see situations where inventors are think that their role is the most important role in creating the company, and it is very often a recipe for trouble. One has to understand that the people who are committing their life and career and time to taking it ahead are very often the people who investors are going to bet on, not necessarily the inventors. This is, of course, a famous case of BioNTech and mRNA technologies. The two people on the left are the key inventors. They won the Nobel Prize in 2023. And the people on the right are the people who founded BioNTech, which worked with Pfizer to create the mRNA vaccine. And of course, these are two scientists who bet on the potential of this mRNA technology. And they also, of course, hired who Dr. Carico on the left panel out here as the head of R&D, and took the technology ahead to what you see today. It's a $1 billion company now, Beyond Tech, and they have taken an idea to fruition during very troubling times. Not at all easy to do, and these people play a very important role. So my message to most inventors in this audience is find your technology commercialization champions. Those are your biggest assets. So that should be one of the first things you need to do and keep looking out for. Even if you start a company, you still keep looking out for those people because those are the people who really matter in the company as well. The other point I wanted to make for the benefit of our inventors is that innovation is a team sport. Many of you do work in research labs. You will be driving a program. You know about teams and the efforts that teams put in together, including your students, postdocs, everybody. But in a startup environment, sometimes you as an inventor cannot be behaving like Usain Bolt out there on the left, but more like you will probably be one amongst the many people in the black t-shirts on the right who are taking this person in the white t-shirt to victory. The white t-shirt person might be on the spotlight, that's Kipchoge, and that might be your full-time founder of your startup. And you, all of you, as inventors, well-wishers, partners, whatever, will be all breaking the wind for him to finish in the marathon in 2 hours. Okay. So grants, as I told you, plays a very important role in financing spinouts. And the way it does that is if you can imagine a graph of money versus time, and you're investing money into a company and then coming out with potential rewards, the the reward to risk ratio is the area under the curve on the right divided by the area of the under the curve on the left. And what happens typically is that if you take a lot of risk, your reward to risk ratio doesn't look very favorable. And when you put in a grant, the government puts in a grant or a charitable organization puts in a grant, it essentially reduces the risk that one is undertaking. And therefore, the overall picture improves. The risk reward to risk ratio looks a little more favorable. But of course, there are other uncertainties in this process, which I don't have time to get into. But the good thing for Indian inventors and others who want to create startups is in the last about 20 years, there are a lot of different funds which have emerged, which allow first generation entrepreneurs to start their companies. So here on the green, you see all these government related funds from say DST on the top, BIRAC, several others. Some, of course, are disappearing right now, but you'll see. Also, you can see that there are charities, there's CSR funding in different ways. So there are pockets of funds which you can tap. There are still gaps, but things have changed dramatically from the past, where this top line used to be available, which is only family funding or traditional venture capital angel funding, and there were gaps in between depending on the domains you were working in. Today, for science-based entrepreneurship, there are funding pockets. Um, there may be periods when it doesn't work very well, but at least that funding pocket exists today, especially for private entities, for proof of concept funding, for initial prototype demonstration, for regulatory approvals, certification, testing, field trials. All that can be funded quite well through grants. That's usually the technology de-risking part of it. When it comes to commercial production and sales marketing, usually you have to either go with investor funds or loans. It's government grants typically work only in the early part of this journey, not the later part of the journey, typically. So let's talk a little bit about one class of spinouts, which is faculty entrepreneurship. I'll go a little faster here because there is a longer video available on the Only One Theme playlist of TechX. If some of you are interested, you can search. Vedang, maybe you can put in a link to that as well. Faculty entrepreneurship is where there is a faculty founder shareholder in a new startup company, where there's somebody from that parent organization being involved. And in that role, in the very early stages, what you're doing as a faculty member contributing to this activity is first conception of the business idea and contributing to the foresight involved in defining that opportunity. Now, people underestimate this, but it is a conviction of that opportunity and the foresight of that opportunity around which people bet, right? Other people who want to be co-founders, people who want to join your team, people who want to put in money, right? So that's a very important role that people play in the early stages. Getting the new venture started, being committed, willing to do that extra effort in your spare time, championing the new idea, evangelizing that opportunity, tying up some critical resources, motivating co-founders, dealing with earliest risks and uncertainties. These are all things which an early co-founder who might be a faculty staff scientist might do. This might all revolve around the technology idea that they might have come up with in the lab or not. But in any case, all this is involved in doing that as well, right? So, for example, Moderna's co-founder was Dr. Professor Langer. He there were a couple of other people who conceptualized this idea that in the Boston area that you could take mRNA and make it produce different proteins, and they also immediately went with Professor Langer to sit with them, and come up and chart out the course for what is today Moderna, including people who say put in the money right up front, which was flagship pioneering, right, which again is led by a scientist. Okay, so that initial putting together things is a very important role. That happens when founders are getting together. So many examples of this globally, of course, many such examples. I just want to tell you a brief message here, which is that today, there are a lot of Nobel laureates who found companies as well. It's not something which good academics don't do. Okay, which is so you can see a lot of them in these areas. Most of them are trying to create more impact from their science. Okay, and that is a very important activity that they are doing out there. Many names you'll recognize here for CRISPR, these two, Doudna and Charpentier, Francis Arnold for enzyme development using some of the methodologies from derived out of evolution. Of course, an Indian name, Amar Bose, professor at MIT, who went on to start Bose Speakers. Professor's friend who's a pioneer in the organic light emitting diode space and a founder and a person who inaugurated Venture Center as well. And people like Graham Bell, who was a professor at Boston University many years back, and they started AT&T eventually. In India too, these are three companies that I have been tracking, and I feel uh, they're, they're doing great. So one is, of course, Sedemac from IIT Bombay. They're going to hit, I think they'll be up for an IPO sometime this year. Let's see how that happens. And also ImmunoAct, working on CAR T cell therapy. And of course, many years back, Strand started by Vijay Chandru and others from ISC Bangalore as well. And that's something which many of you are familiar with. So it's not new. It's just that it's rare, relatively rare. But today, given the numbers that you're seeing, for example, 50 out of IIT Madras just last year, I think then probably you'll have many more coming out there. And of course, as I told you, there are several examples from NCL as well. There are some differences in the entrepreneurial journey, which you should keep in mind as well between when faculty are doing it versus when others are doing it, right? One is that faculty founder is constrained by obligations to an academic R&D organization has to follow its rules because they're signed up for employment in that organization. So there'll be issues relating to permissions, which means that the organization has to have a policy to do it. And beyond the policy, they need to have people who are supportive of these activities rather than people who are negative about these activities. Time commitments, use of resources, they need to be watchful that they clearly partition their activities such that they're not using resources which belong to the institution without permission. There might be some conflicts that they need to deal with, which is managed. It is not always avoided. It is managed in the sense that it is meant to be disclosed and kept separate. Okay. Provisions to go on leave or lien might be there depending upon the policies of each organization as well. Very often, the background IP is owned by the academic organization, which means that in these kind of cases, you need to also take provisions. You have to have provisions for rights and licenses from the parent organization, which is an added layer. If you are a company startup which didn't take any IP from any academic organization, you don't need to do that, which sometimes uh, you know uh, uh, reduces some of the uncertainties that startups face. So it's like on the other hand, if you do have background IP and an academic organization has worked on an idea for 10 years, It's that 10 years of effort and that advantage that it brings to the table that startups can have the benefit of if they are licensing any IP from some of these organizations as well, right? So there are enabling policies and provisions, and this will be available to all of you if you need. So I don't need to go into it in detail. I just want to briefly tell you that policies can relate to permission to found a startup, time commitments, use of institutional resources, management of conflict of interest commitments, provision to go on leave or lien, rights to IP, right? That I've already discussed that. And there may be support mechanisms as well. So, for example, in many institutions around the world, spin-outs are actively supported by universities because they have seen the benefit in terms of the impact creation that spin-outs and startups offer to researchers, right? And the ability to generate impact on the ground is something which many institutions value. So you will find in universities around the world and research institutions that there are specific programs on new venture creation awareness and training. For example, the NSF's ICORP program and IIT Madras's GPC runs a similar program on customer discovery, is something in that direction. Or Venture Center runs something called Startup 101 every year. Networking opportunities, IP protection support, for example, institutions take up the onus of supporting IP, protecting IP so that people are investing in those ideas which came out of those institutions. There might be licensing office support, there might be an incubator, and today there are both POC funds and investment funds operated by technology transfer offices. And that's something which didn't happen, say, 10 years back as well. So, like, there are universities which are running today proof of concept funds and even seed funds, or either directly or through incubators supporting some of these activities. Some of these institutions have very large amounts of funds, like Oxford and Cambridge have very large funds running into hundreds of $1 million available for such activities. And that's one of the reasons why you see so many spinouts coming up as well. In the Indian context, there was an office memorandum around 2009 from the DSIR, which basically created the framework which is relevant for most research institutions and academic institutions in India. The IIT started a little early, being created under an act of the parliament. They were able to set it up themselves, but this is the one that allows officially organizations that have adopted this OM can actually do some of these things which are listed here. One is scientists, professors can promote companies, institutes, labs can give technology in lieu of equity, and of course, creation of incubators. And there's also a scheme for mobility of researchers as well. DBT did something similar, and this is also available online. And that is also being implemented. In fact, Venture Center has facilitated a couple of spinouts for DBT as well from some of their labs as well, right? Um, so this DSIR OM was adopted by CSIR and rolled out, and places like CSIR and NCL adopted them and initiated that. Similar thing happened with DBT as well. So the typical process flow is to first identify candidates. If you're a technology manager in an institution like this, work on it in as a desk research with interns, with the inventors, to first evolve a pitch deck which is convincing for everybody. Eventually, the goal is that the tech provider, which is the inventor, the entrepreneur, and some funding have to get tied in. So one can apply for some funding pockets. BIG does allow, for example, BIRAC BIG does allow for individual applicants who want to convert to companies. So that's one good way to do it. You build some confidence, commitment in the initial team, get your approvals, do a co-founders agreement, incorporate a company gets a license, and then the license allows them to operate further as well. Okay, so this is roughly the structure in which it is followed as well. There are a lot of policies available online, which many of you can use. This is something easily available online. So I will just tell you briefly. MIT's Inventors Guide to Startups is available online. It also talks about not only IP policy, but conflict of interest and outside professional activities as well. And it's very simple. It's about 20% of the time is allowed for faculty to pursue these things. That's 1 day a week, basically, for them. Even Indian institutions have such policies now, and that's been adopted in even CSIR has such a policy as well. The National Innovation and Startup Policy for Students and Faculty by Ministry of Education also has some of these provisions which are in the policy which you can tap if you're a academic organization associated with Ministry of Education. IIT Bombay startup policy is also online. Some of you may want to browse through it if you're interested. IIT Kanpur's policy is also online. And of course, finally, I'll just close with a few things about managing conflict of interest and commitment. Okay. So the basic idea is that there's a parent organization and there's a spin out. The nature of activities need to be different, right? So if, let us say, a research organization is providing research services, the spin out providing the same research services would be a conflict. But if, say, a spin out is producing a product, which the research organization will never produce, it's not going to productize it, manufacture. Now, there's no conflict at all over there as well. Similarly, things very simple ideas like you don't start a company with your current student, right, or a subordinate. I mean, it can be past student, but not necessarily current student, because that person has to graduate and they depend upon uh, you as a faculty member, being their supervisor as well. So one needs to create simple, transparent systems in order to manage some of these conflicts. It's not very difficult. It's just a matter of that. It's about conflict management, not necessarily avoidance in all cases. If you want to promote such companies, and that should be part of your policy of your organization, so that your organization can show impact. I suspect that in the coming years, it will be extremely difficult for people who try to do only conventional tech transfer to create impact. They will need to look at spinouts, and it will be quite important to do that as well. Okay. So it's important to manage conflicts, not to avoid it, not to shy away from it necessarily, right? I think these are a couple of slides which I will skip in the interest of time, but we can talk about this if time permits. The final things about some tips and pointers. First, for tech managers, incubation, innovation, and tech transfer or managers who are in this meeting today, in this talk. Um, so we find that it's the part where you have to do get product market fit, which is fit between getting the problem, solution, value proposition, customer, all that right is what takes time. It's not the early part where you have a proof of concept for a technology. And that is what you have to create time for in order to, as a spin out, to figure that out. Because the moment you get that right, your storytelling becomes easier for investors, co-founders, and so on and so forth. Um, at least have one co-founder, full-time co-founder from the early stages. And that's why inventors who want to pursue this route should keep their eyes open for full-time co-founders. Okay. People they can trust, people they can work with, people who they believe have leadership qualities to take it ahead. The most challenging aspect has always been finding good co-founders. You need wider networks than which you're used to. It won't come necessarily from only an academic circles, right? It needs to be from other points of view. You need to have a little bit of mutual respect there. Please understand, as I told you, that your full-time entrepreneur is extremely important to the success of your startup. Okay. Uh, Most investors will invest in the entrepreneur and not the innovator. Okay, they want to see you making money out of whatever technology you have, and not necessarily only coming up with new ideas every day. Okay, so that mindset change is quite important, and that a good co-founder can bring to the table as well, right? And as I've said here, prefer full-time founders. They will invest in entrepreneurs, not innovators. Um, Silent partners should have minimum shareholding and minimum uncertainties in IP and technology license. Okay. And minimum future payouts that will reduce valuations. You can structure payouts such that the valuations are not affected as much, but you should try to maximize valuation for the companies if they have to raise enough money as well. And it takes time, patience to do all of this. It doesn't happen early. If you heard stories stories of it happening fast. That is not necessary. It's not the norm. So please understand it takes time. Funding exists, but it's very patchy in India for different sectors as well. Finally, lessons for some scientists and faculty. Do this only if you are working on a large and pressing problem. Startups don't raise money very often for small problems, incremental problems. It has to be reasonably large and a pressing problem. At least one full-time co-founder is needed. Look for them. Uh, your cap table or your shareholding table, right, has to be such that the full-time founders lead the company and are majority shareholders, right? Understand the importance of the champion. Ability to pitch, storytelling is very important. Many scientists speak jargon and don't communicate what needs to be communicated to the investors, and that's quite a problem. Um, Being mentorable and willing to accept advice. There's a little bit of humility needed. You might be the world's foremost expert on your topic, but there are many, many things you may not know of, which is okay to learn from others. And that mentorability is something which investors, incubators all value in founders, right? Willingness to raise money. If you're doing high risk stuff, you have to be willing to raise money. You can't grow it on just income. It doesn't work. So willingness to raise money becomes an important activity in the startup world. And finally, the commitment has to be seeing the product in the market. And it's not about the some few awards that you might get in the early stages, saying, "Oh yeah, great! Here is a scientist starting a company," or some newspaper reports and so on and so forth. At the end of the day, what really matters is products serving customers and their and the company basically thriving and growing. And that is the proof of whether it works or not. It is not about how cool the technology is. That is not what people are interested in when they're building businesses. Okay. So I think with that, I'll stop. Thank you very much. I can take questions, but that's where I'll stop, right? Vedant, do you want to set up the questions for me? Or
Yeah, before we go on to the questions, a gentle reminder, the link for the feedback is in the chat box. Please give us your feedback. It's very invaluable for us. And also the expression of interest link is there for those who are interested in spin out options. So yes, we'll just call out the questions.
I think Rajanish had a question about
Yeah.
equity shares. I had discussed this. Typically, university equities are in the low numbers. It's about 1 to 5%, but you can structure deals in such a way that there's sometimes it's just equity, sometimes it could be a combination of equity and royalties, or it could be also that you're offering certain services and so on and so forth as well. Um, so that I hope answers your question. If you want, you can raise your hand as well, and
We
our
have
team will try to open the mic for you.
we
Okay?
have a question from Ram Siddhappa.
Yeah.
One minute. Yeah. So he asks, is there a limit for academicians to hold equity in the startups without affecting working in the academic institution?
Yeah, so there are no such rules. You can typically what happens is the early stage of your startup is very fluid. So what I typically tell people is that the early founders and shareholders are actually like trustees. The moment you find somebody to lead the company, you might rearrange the shareholding. So I don't take the early stage of shareholding sacrosanct. It is something which, if they are wise founders, they need to learn how to rearrange the shares depending upon the requirement. Because so it might start in some way in where, say, somebody is holding a lot more equity, but with a full understanding that it will later get rearranged in order to facilitate a team and incentivize all the full-time team members who are very important to this whole activity. Yeah, I hope that answers your question.
So he has also asked as an extension of that question, equity plus royalty for inventors, is it a double dip or is it usually either or?
Yeah, so this equity plus royalty are meant for the academic research organizations. Okay. By the way, in most organizations, the inventor has essentially assigned IP to the organization. So they are not getting their equity for technology per se, right? They are getting the equity for conception of the idea, being co-founders and developing that business itself in the early stages. So now the question is, how do you so the different philosophies. One philosophy is to just go with a simple equity model. Another philosophy is to do equity models only for the upfront fees and leave the royalty intact. Okay, so that's another model that the many US universities have worked with. I had shown two draft agreement links, the bolt US bolt agreements. You will see that both of them will be there in those. It's up to you. You can drop any of those if you think it's too much. Now, as far as the inventors themselves go, the inventors when are getting their if they are participating in the company, they have to contribute as co-founders in the conception development of the early stage company, whatever they are allowed to do by their parent company, and that's what they get some equity for. But more importantly, I think I don't see it as a double dip because that's a different role that they're playing, and that is assigned to the company, right? It's a company. The academic organization which owns the IP, and it's not them who are bringing the IP to the company itself, right? Unless there's a separate agreement which allows them to do that between the academic organization and the startup company. Yeah.
Yeah, Soumya Tiwari has asked, can you elaborate on having a spin-out or spin-off policy for university for faculty-led startups?
I think I gave few links. For example, I told you about IIT Bombay, IIT Kanpur, and so on and so forth. By the way, the first thing faculty entrepreneurship policy needs to say is that the organization believes that it is an important thing to do and that they will encourage their employees to start companies. Okay, that is the first thing as a guiding principle that you need to do in such policies, which is it needs to be made very clear that it is aligned with the organization's goals, right? When say an academic organization sees a startup come up, which is essentially delivering the benefits of the knowledge creation done in that institute to the people at large. And when the people see that benefit, they respect that academic organization. They are willing to say support its claim for grants with the government and so on and so forth. That I think is a win-win, right? And that should be very clearly put down. So the guiding principles are the first thing that you start with when you do a policy document, and it should be outright in saying that this is something which we want people to do. Okay, and then how to facilitate that comes in later, right? And those, I think there are a lot of guidelines already available. I've shown you a few. I hope if you need, please write to my colleagues. Vedant, you can put out an email address and we'll send you some of these links directly as well.
Sure. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
There's a
sir.
hand up, I think, of Dr. Kabre. Can you uh, please allow him to speak?
Yeah,
Yes.
Yeah.
go ahead, Dr. Kapil.
No, that was by mistake, sir.
Okay, okay, fine.
Yeah,
Okay.
so
Yeah. Any other questions?
Now we have a question from our YouTube from Dr. Dinesh Sawant. Who would be more reliable partners, faculty, spouse, relatives, friends, students, or similar interested people? And can a politician be involved as a financer?
As a financier.
Financer.
Okay. So, first of all, um, when you're building a company, you want founders and co-founders um, who think of it this way, that if it's a startup, um, you want it to succeed. You want people to bet on that company as investors, as co-founders, and so on and so forth, right? The question is, who is that, who one or two people or three people who bring that confidence to that company. So the way I look at it is people who have become shareholders of a company should be people who have a direct impact on the value of the company. Okay. That means they should create value for the company and significant value. It is not one of convenience. Okay. So it doesn't matter who they are, it's relatives or not relatives or whatever it is. If they contribute to value in the company, fine. If they don't contribute to value in the company, you should never have them in the company at all. Okay. That's first thing to keep in mind as well. The second question, I think, was more about investors, right? As far as investors is concerned, you should, so uh, in the investing world, right? People will the serious investors are interested in having great clarity, okay, of purpose in the organization, and you ensuring that everything that their returns, whatever you're promising as returns, are delivered with minimum risks. Okay, so the keyword in startup world when you raise money is how you manage your risks. Okay, so for example, when a startup say de-risks technology, it is managing its risks. When a startup gets regulatory approvals, it has reduced some of its risks. When a startup finds right team members, it has reduced risks. When startup has enough funds from investors, it has reduced certain risks, right? So the same way, if any person who associates with the company was poses a risk to the company, be it an investor or a team member, then you don't want them associated with the company unnecessarily. Okay. And that could be a politician. You have to take a call whether they pose a risk or not. Okay. So it's a question of what is the risk they are bringing to the table. Okay. And another risk, of course, is that, in serious investors and anybody who sort of wants to build some of these companies don't want risks associated of reputation, also reputation risk. So there's another risk that one needs to take care of. So that's how one should think about it. It is, don't do startups with the idea of just conveniently doing whatever you can. That's not the objective of doing a startup. It is about building an organization which will deliver impact. Okay. It doesn't result in short-term gains, I can tell you that for sure. So people who are interested in short-term gains definitely don't want to do that. Okay.
Do we have
Questions?
time for one last question from Adesh? He asks if spin-out technologies from a public R&D center like CSR and the organization wants to license it and they can't give exclusive rights to the founders and investors, are there any precedents where the regional time-bound exclusivity is given to startups and companies?
Yeah. So first of all, uh, uh, there is. Uh, I mean, this specifically says CSIR, but so in CSIR, I can tell you that there is no restriction on giving exclusive licenses. You just have to ensure that you justify it and it is justified. And there are certain other organizations where there may be restrictions on giving exclusive licenses, but it's more of a, I mean, that, and some have also changed it. For example, PBT has made provisions recently to also allow certain amount of exclusivity in the kind of licenses that they provide as well. So people are changing those terms depending upon what they are seeing as trends and best practices and so on and so forth. It might be a strategic choice of the organization, which is okay, right? If they choose not to give exclusive, that's up to them. But it is not necessarily only based on rules. So I hope I answered your question, Adish.
So we have two more questions. Do we have time for it? Shall we?
Yeah, let's quickly cover
Yeah.
it.
So Bhavesh
Others who want to
Mewada,
leave can leave. Yeah, please.
Bhavesh Mewada asks, what is the benefit to a private university to go for a spin-out?
Yeah, so see, private universities. So, by the way, Stanford is a private university, right? You can see the impact of spin-outs like Google, for example, and so on. When people think of the university, They think about all the leaders in industry, the leaders in among people that you created, right? That's what build reputation for your for your university. At the end of the day, uh, you know your reputation matters, and it attracts all the talent that you need as any kind of entity, private or government organization, right? So that's what the purpose is for you. Even private universities, they will get funds from the government also for innovation support, for example, depending on their reputations, right? And that is going to be forced by the kind of entrepreneurial activities and impact that you have. So for example, among private universities in India, BITS has done very well, right, in terms of entrepreneurship, right? And they have a reputation. So they can at least stand up and say that they stand out in those terms. And many universities today are showcasing their alumni entrepreneurs, their spin out companies, and say that, look, this is a product of our university, right? That talks about quality, that talks about inventive spirit, that talks about entrepreneurship from your organization, that talks about truly doing something that really has impact in the world and changing the world for the better, right? So, so I think you have a lot of role models as a private university to do this. Stanford, MIT, all are private universities, right? Harvard. Okay. Next question.
Yeah. Tanmoy Patra asks, are there any cohort-based learning programs in India that leverage customer discovery funding similar to NSF ICOPS, which supports inventors or graduate students to explore product market fit?
Yes, Tanmay, that I talked about GDC's Gopal Krishnan Deshpande Center in IIT Madras, founded by Chris Gopal Krishnan and Dev Deshpande, which is basically rolling out these programs only. And they do work with academic institutions and promote ICOT-like customer discovery programs. But besides that, all that literature is available online. I think any academic institution can consider doing an ICORP equivalent within their organization. I would encourage all technology management groups to roll it out internally within their organizations and take pointers from people like GDC, and that would be something which you can consider doing as an in-house activity for both students and staff as well. Yeah.
Uh, Rajneesh has one question. Should a buyback equity clause be a good option in a spin-off agreement, and when should it be triggered?
Yeah. So. Uh, Rajneesh, the broader answer is that should be exit clauses, right? You should have any academic research organization typically doesn't want to stay there forever, right? It wants to exit at some point. Now the question is, what are those exit options that you will want to retain? How do you exit and when? So your exit options will have multiple possibilities. One is that one of them could be a buyback clause, right? But it's an option available to you, right? If you want, you can make it an option available to the entrepreneur if that is what your intention is. So you can do it either way. But that's one of the exit options. You should also have other exit options, including, you know, being able to buy back at with a certain IRR, or buy the founders or the company, or being able to sell to another entity, or joining an exit of other investors in the company, so on and so forth. So all those options can be built into those agreements, right? So you should keep multiple options for exits, and you will want to exit and use that fund to do something, support other startups or research in your organization. Although I must tell you that this the exits, whatever returns you get, are never very large. Okay, so have a reasonable sense of it. Okay, occasionally you might hit a jackpot, but typically most organizations don't make much in around the world. Okay, yeah. Any question?
Yeah, I think we have covered all the questions. Anyone left?
There
You can
seems
raise
to,
your hand.
yeah. Some,
We
yeah, I think we
request
have covered. Yeah.
whoever, Yeah, so we request whoever is there online, if you can switch on your video and we can take a quick shot.
Vedant, tell us.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes. Okay.
yeah, requesting people to switch on their videos for a quick shot photograph to put up on our social media handles.
Okay. Uh,
Uh,
thanks,
we can't be
Vedant.
smiling forever, Vedant.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes.
Okay.
Done, sir. Yes.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you
Thank you.
very much.
Thanks.
Thanks a lot.
Please
Thank you
don't
very much.
give us the feedback.
Thank you very much. See you.
Yeah. Thank you.